ice and snow, where waddling feet go. Penguins in their tuxedos come to show the joy. From the pools to the skies, they play and frolic true. Welcome to Penguin Paradise, where every day's a new adventure too.
Welcome to All About Penguins podcast, where we talk about penguins. Today's guest is Stefan Christmann, a German physicist turned award-winning nature photographer whose work centers on one of Earth's toughest environments, Antarctica, and of course also of its most remarkable animals, the emperor penguin. In 2012, he spent more than a year at Neumayer-Station documenting the emperor penguin colony at Atka Bay, where he later returned in 2016 for an extended photographic expedition with the BBC film team for capturing even deeper insights into penguin behavior for the BBC Dynasties Emperor Penguin film. He has received major international recognition, including the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, as well as the Ocean Photographer of the Year. And in 2020, he published his book Penguin: Story of Survival, which takes you inside the world of emperor penguins, revealing their resilience, their tight-knit communities, and how climate change is reshaping their lives. Today we will talk about his journey, the realities of photography in extreme environments, the behavior of emperor penguin, of course the book Penguin: A Story of Survival, and some stories behind some of the most iconic images. Stefan Christmann, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you here, and let's dive just right in. I did a little research before the show, and I know you were born in Germany and first discovered your love for the wild nature during an exchange in Montana. I mean, when I look at the pictures in Montana, it's the nature there is wild. I put it immediately on my travel bucket list. So can you tell us what was the first encounter for you, like with such a wide landscape and the wildlife? How did it feel like?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm also super excited to be here and to talk about my experience. And to come back to your question, when I think back of that student exchange, it was in 2002. I don't know, I was like 16, 17, something like that. We were in Montana and we were visiting Yellowstone National Park, which is like one of the largest national parks in the world. I think it's the largest national park in the US even. And it was the first time that I can remember that I really experienced the wilderness. So yes, you have roads that go through the park, obviously, but aside from these roads, there's wilderness through and through, places where you can only hike into, and there was an abundance of wildlife and things I had never seen in Germany, right? So in Germany, everything's shy. Like, I don't know, you can be happy if you see a deer or something, but that's about it. And there we had bison roaming. We saw wolves. It was just incredible. And that's one of the most memorable wildlife experience that I had. And that kind of got me interested in wild places and nature in general and the nature experience.
I can only imagine being in Europe as well. You usually get just like lucky when you see a fox maybe during the winter. So
yeah, exactly.
Seeing a huge wildlife just roaming must have felt amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that when you came back from the US, your father gave you a camera. And do you remember the first picture you took?
I do not. I only remember the first picture I took where I realized that I needed a different camera to capture my vision. And that was actually in Yellowstone National Park. It was one of those great landscapes. I think there were even bison in it. But by the way, if you saw the first images I ever took, they were just horrible. But it's all part of the learning experience. I took this photo, I still know it, and I looked on the back of my camera. So it was digital point and shoot camera. And it just didn't show anything that I just saw with my eyes, the vast expanse of the landscape and so on. It was not my vision on the back of the screen. So I knew that I had to really dig a little bit deeper and to learn about photography. And I knew that my dad had photographed in his younger days. And he still had a camera, which was an analog camera, a Minolta SRT 303B. So I still know it because it was such a memorable experience. And I actually took the step back from digital. I went back to film. And I started out with film. And then I started with slide film because after a while, I figured out that I needed more control over my exposures. And that's what got me started. And I know that I was in Germany trying to find wild places. Obviously, I didn't find very many of them. There were a few foresty areas where a good friend of mine and we spent our time. He was also picking up the camera at that point in time, and we were exploring just as friends, exploring what we could do with our cameras, with our vision, with our ideas. And we were focusing on smaller things like on macro photography, maybe on landscapes, things that wouldn't fly or run away if we saw them. So we had all the time in the world we needed in order to understand how a camera works.
Wow, thank you. I think you also gave me just a good way how to learn proper photography, how to start learning.
Yeah, it actually helps. It actually helps to go back and to really have to do everything in a manual fashion. You don't have that instant checkup, right? So you don't take a photo and you can check, but maybe you have a roll of film, 36 frames, and you shoot and shoot and shoot, and you make the same mistake 36 times. And then you get the roll of film back and you look at all the images, and it's like 36 needle stings into your skin that are telling you, okay, the next time you better take care that you don't make that mistake again.
But I remember those old times when I waited for the pictures to be ready, and then I was usually the first one, like, I want to see them, like, which one came out good and which one not.
Yeah.
The good old times, now we have our phones. When we go on a trip, we take 1,000 pictures that nobody goes through later on. It just sits in the phone.
Yeah, which is also great in its own way, but I think there was a certain magic about film,
Yeah.
about not knowing what you had done until exactly.
It was kind of a surprise. Going a little bit back, you also studied physics, if I'm not mistaken, and did this scientific background somehow shape the way you approach photography?
Maybe also it was a nice, let's say, counterbalance to a technical study that I was doing, right? So physics is a very technical field, lots of math, lots of rules, lots of all these things that you have to follow. And I felt like in photography, I could express myself freely. And even if there are certain rules to photography, or what people call rules, once you understood them, typically you start breaking them because that's going to make a much more interesting photograph in the end. So maybe that was kind of like my balance to my studies. But I would say what physics and photography have in common is that you have to observe, right? You have to observe what's happening. You have to try to make sense of it. You have to find the core of it, kind of. And that's what I feel photography is about as well. So when I approach a subject or something that I'm interested in, I try to figure out what it is that interests me. And then I try to focus on that particular aspect. And if I succeed, it's a good photo. If I don't succeed, it will be somewhere in my database and I'll never look at it again. Or maybe I will look at it years later and find out there was something that I found. I just didn't understand it back then. That's what happens in my penguin photos all the time. I have an incredibly large archive of photos, and some of the pictures, when I go through them again, every now and then I find a little gem that I had overlooked the first time.
You never know, like with some of the pictures, when you will come back to them, like maybe on the first look, it doesn't look like, okay, this is the one for you. But I have a few pictures when I go back later. Oh, yeah, this is actually a nice one.
Yeah, exactly. As we're getting older, maybe our perspective changes or our look on things, and maybe all of a sudden something that you deemed was not interesting all of a sudden becomes interesting.
Did also your background in science somehow help you prepare for environments like the Antarctica?
I would also say maybe not directly, but indirectly. Obviously, I would have never gotten my first job on the research station if I hadn't studied physics. That in a way connected me to the penguins. Other than that, just being amazed by how these creatures can survive in such conditions. If you're a physicist and you know what it means to be at minus 40 degrees, or what it does to liquids, to living organisms, everything. I mean, I'm not a biology major. I studied physics. I didn't really have anything from my studies that I could apply to the penguins, but knowing the conditions they were in are tough. That's maybe something that made me realize what special creatures they are.
I can only agree about them being special.
Yeah.
And talking about Antarctica, if you could tell us a little bit more, how do you prepare like for a trip to such a remote place? What does it take mentally, physically, logistically? I cannot even imagine to plan a trip like to be months in Antarctica.
Yeah, to be honest, I wouldn't be able to do this all by myself. So obviously, I was there with a research institute that was handling most of the logistics. Running a research station at the end of the world is a monumental task, as you can imagine, maybe. The things you have to think about, the contingency plans if something goes wrong, there's endless things that you need to think about. But for us as the wintering crew, I did a total of 2 winters on Neumayer-Station in Antarctica. For us winterers, there is a very clear path to the overwintering, things that we have to do as a preparation for our
Mm,
stay there. And first of all, you have to go through a lot of medical exams because they want to rule out that you have any precondition that could manifest once you're down there. So they check your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver. I mean, everything pretty much. Every organ is checked if it's healthy. And then afterwards, once this is done, they will send you on a couple of courses where you learn the basic things that you need to know when you're down there. First and foremost, a firefighting course. That's like the worst thing that could happen to you if your
okay.
base burnt down because there's nothing else around. If your house burns down, you're pretty much on your own, and you won't have anybody who comes and picks you up. There's an isolation phase of around 9 to 10 months where no plane can land and no ship can come into the bay, and that means you are on your own. You better have a roof above your head, otherwise it's going to get very uncomfortable. Firefighting, number one. Very important course. A second very important course was a glacier course, or what we call glacier rescue, learning how to behave on ice, how to behave on a glacier,
Mm,
because the ice shelf in principle is nothing else but a glacier, with the difference that it's not grounded on land anymore, but it's actually afloat on the water, but it's still connected to the main glacier that is on land. So in principle, everything that you do on a glacier also applies to some extent on ice shelf. And here we learned, for example, how to explore regions that you don't know,
mm,
how to rope up, to make sure that if someone falls into a crevasse, you can get them out again. All of the roping techniques that you might need over there, as well as building shelters from snow and ice. And even like the basic things, if you think about camping, how to use a camping cooker, how to make water, how to make food, principle, how to survive for a couple of days in case you get stranded outside in
mm.
a storm or something like that. Those were the main things that we needed to learn in order to be enabled to go down there. In the end, it's a very exciting courses, but it's very easy for the wintering crew because the path you have to take, it's a very linear path.
The courses sound really interesting, and thinking about what you mentioned, I think whenever I'm in the wild, I hope you are somewhere nearby because it seems like you will be prepared for anything.
If it is cold, I could probably help.
Maybe we can set up some winter hiking somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and when you think back to your like first winter at the Neumayer station, what did you learn about yourself during that time? We usually prepare ourselves for anything, but then it's different when you are actually there.
Yeah, it is. I think I learned about myself that I can deal with the cold very well. A lot of people struggled with the cold. To
Mm,
me, it actually, for the most time, I mean, not every day, but for the most time, it felt good to be out in the cold. I like this chill against my skin. Um, but I think what I really learned about myself is how little I needed during that time. When people go on a trip and they pack their suitcases and it can never be full enough or it's always too heavy because you feel like there's so much stuff you need to take with you. But then once you are away for a longer time, maybe you realize that a lot of this stuff you actually don't need. As overwinterers, we had the opportunity to pack big aluminum boxes with our personal belongings, things we thought we would need during the 15 months that we were there.
mm.
And we filled these boxes. everybody had at least 2 of these big boxes. I think I even had 3 boxes, and I had another box with my guitar in it because I didn't want to go without my instrument. And I ended up opening one of these boxes. The other ones just remained closed for the entire time of the winter. And that taught me how little you actually need when the basics are covered, meaning you have food on the table, you have a roof over your head, and you have a warm bed that you can sleep in.
Hmm.
And that's really all I needed. I think the things that I was really missing were people in my life that I couldn't take with me. For example, my wife, obviously, my parents, my friends, people that I like having around and who all of a sudden weren't around for a long time. I was missing them much more than I was missing any physical item that I could
Hmm.
have taken with me.
It would be a good training for some overpackers out there.
It would be, yes. So I think I've never actually exceeded my baggage allowance ever since anymore.
Good to know. And now that you have been also the second time there, is there anything super essential that you would also bring a third time?
My camera, obviously. I think only means of communication, really. Maybe you have a favorite sweater that you like to wear or favorite socks or whatever. Yes, bring them, of course. But is this going to be the end of the world in case you forgot it? No, it's not going to be the end of the world. But having the means of communication with your loved ones, I think that's something very essential. And, being able to share your experiences. And I think that is pretty much covered at every base, at least that I can think of, that is operated in Antarctica. They're making sure that everybody can reach their loved ones. I would even argue to some extent it has been too connected in the past years. So the first time when I was there at Neumayer, that was 2012.
Hmm.
We had an internet connection that was roughly 1 megabit for 9 people. You can imagine that's fairly slow internet. I think they've upped this by quite a bit now. And ever since they have increased the bandwidth, people are spending more time on social media when they should actually be out experiencing this place.
Hmm.
In a way, I would say that there's even a chance that there can be too much communication, or I guess you can even argue that, just being on social media is not really communicating, it's more consuming, I would
Hmm.
say. To that extent, it can be too much as well. But having the means of getting in touch with others, that's the most important thing.
I can agree, only agree. And talking about the extreme temperatures there, how do you protect your equipment, like the batteries, the lenses, and electronics? I mean, how do they survive?
Yeah, the funny thing is I didn't actually do anything special at all. The only thing I did was whenever I was not shooting, I would take the battery out of the camera and put it in my pocket to keep it warm. But that's pretty much the only trick that I used when I was outside, just trying to keep the batteries warm. Aside from this, if you're not specifically shooting in a snowstorm, it's the cold isn't really going to affect your camera gear all that much. Yes, it will drown the batteries faster. Screens will get very sluggish at some time, like the LCD crystals on the backside of your screen, they will start to become very slow. So you don't get that instant feedback anymore. So it's a little bit like going back to film, maybe. You don't exactly know what you're doing. And aside from this, if there is blowing snow or drifting snow or something like that, I try not to warm up the camera too much, because whenever you have snow crystals, they're going into every little opening inside the camera, little gaps on the body. I typically used a paintbrush in order to wipe it off. I didn't use any towels or any cloth things or stuff like this, but I used a paintbrush to brush out the snow and then tried to keep the camera cold for the entire time, just taking out the batteries
Hmm.
and the memory cards when I was going inside again. But for the most time, the camera stayed outside in a closed and sealed box.
Okay, good to know. I will
Yeah.
write that down in case I go to Antarctica and need to take pictures.
You should bring one of those Peli cases with you and then close it up and make sure that after a snowstorm you can still find it.
That's true. Have you ever had a piece of gear completely fail on you?
It actually only happened once when I was photographing at -45, I believe. So it was really cold. And I could hear that the camera was not happy because it was still a DSLR. So it had a mirror going up and down. And you could tell by the sound that this mirror was making that it was not happy about the cold. So it started like screeching. You could tell that the little oils and lubricants that keep the mirror smooth, they were getting stiff. And the mirror or the force of the motor was working against that. And it didn't sound good. And then at some point in time, the mirror just fell off. And I was looking through the viewfinder and half of the frame was black. And I was like, okay, this is weird. What's happening here? Is my aperture stuck or something like that? I didn't really quite understand what was going on. When I took off the lens, the mirror fell out. And it's like, oops, what do I do now? The good thing was that the camera had a live view function. So I could just use the live view, just get the mirror up and then use it as like kind of like a mirrorless camera, which I guess at that point in time, it was a mirrorless camera because the mirror was out. Maybe the first, maybe I actually invented mirrorless cameras. I don't know.
You see, maybe you
I'll
did.
need to think about that. But either way, the funny thing was when I was back inside, I really did a very simple fix. I just took some super glue and glued the mirror back on, and it worked just fine. Obviously, it wasn't really perfectly aligned anymore. And being a physics student or a physics major, I knew exactly that for, these kind of autofocus optics, micrometers are of the essence. Whatever I did there, probably it was not really aligned anymore, but I knew exactly that I could use it to roughly point at what I was shooting, and then I could use the live view and then really focus. I didn't use the mirror for focusing anymore, but I used it for quick pointing, and then I could still use the camera, albeit with a few drawbacks.
Nice. You fixed it and even maybe invented the mirrorless cameras.
Exactly.
And talking a little bit about the cameras, is there any specific setup you rely on most while shooting in the polar environment?
Probably only my lens choices, maybe, in terms of the gear. Yes, I am a Nikon shooter. I have been since I can think of, but I'm not saying that what I do is only possible with a Nikon camera. I think that would not be true. I think the main piece of equipment that I use is my 400 millimeter f2.8 lens, which is a big, heavy, chunky lens, but it also gives you the opportunity to really blur the backgrounds and to really have that soft, out of focus objects. And that's what I really like. And that's what really suits my style. That's the most important piece of equipment that I take with me. And aside from that, I would say I shoot with the standard lenses that everybody else also uses.
So this brings me actually to my next question. Is the lens
Okay.
you mentioned, is this helping you staying invisible with the penguins? Because when I look at your pictures, some of them, I feel you are standing right in the middle of the penguin huddle.
Yeah, it does help, obviously, because you have a very big working distance, and that enables you to be the little fly on the wall. You can actually see what they're doing without affecting what they're doing. But that being said, I would say penguins, emperors in particular, are amongst the most relaxed species I've ever been near. They really couldn't care less if you are there lying on your belly taking photos. I would even claim they don't really care at all. Every now and then you have like the odd one out that comes to you and they will check out what you're doing. Some of them even poked their beaks into my photo pack, checking out my gear. Maybe they were Canon shooters, who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah. But they're very, very laid back. And the reason for that is that they don't know any land predators. So when they're on the ice, there's nothing that would hunt them. And so they don't see you as a threat. They will see you as something interesting that they maybe haven't seen before. But that being said, we all wear these bright red, fleshy overalls, and penguins or emperors, they can get as old as 35, 40 years. Maybe in the wild, they're probably closer to 25, 30-ish, something like that. But they get very old. The thing is that some of these birds probably even, have been around for a long time, and they're quite used to these red people walking by, and they know that they don't mean any harm, and that's why I never had any issues getting close to these birds. And yeah, as I said, some of the time they even get close to you, and these are I would say amongst the nicest moments because it just shows that you are accepted in their environment. You can be proud if you achieve that, I think, with any animal.
Or if they come close to you,
Yeah.
must be an amazing feeling. And I saw
Yeah,
some
it
of
is.
the pictures you have, like selfie with the penguin in the background.
Yeah, it was also a very, very chilled one. I was lying on my belly. I was actually taking a break. I think I was having a cup of tea. And then this guy comes up and he waddles around me like he was actually in my back. So, and then I said, okay, maybe this is a good time to take a fun selfie. And then once I had taken the selfie, he or she, you can't tell really, he or she just laid down next to me. So it was really like this super chill moment.
Chilling with
Uh,
penguins.
very, very nice moment. Probably one of the very many moments I will never forget.
One day I will also chill with penguins. And did the majority of your pictures, did you shoot it like close up with the penguins, or was it more like really you have been this small fly in the back?
I think most of the photos I was pretty far away, I would
Mm.
say. So I do like this element of solitude, this small bird in the big wide landscape. And then you have all these colors and the clouds and the icebergs and so many beautiful elements that make up the image that I tried to incorporate that in my shots mostly.
Mm.
And that's why I think a lot of my photos are taken rather from afar than near. When I was taking photos being nearer, I would usually focus on some particular aspect, like the egg, for example. That was one very crucial photo that I wanted to get, or even better, the egg hatching. That was also pretty cool. But then, focusing on their feet or on their flippers, on their beaks. They're not just black and white birds, as many people think, but they have so many more colors in their color palette.
I think the color palette is pretty visible in the pictures. So,
Yeah,
as you said, they are not just black and white, but there is so much more color happening there.
indeed.
And you spent basically months observing the emperor penguins. What fascinates you most about their behavior and family dynamics?
Oh God, I couldn't name just one thing really. The dedication that they have for their offspring to take care of the egg and later on to take care of the chick. The incredible courtshiping rituals that they have. Like before they mate, they have this ritual where they synchronize all their movements and their calls, and it's just so aesthetic. It's like they're dancing and singing together. That's also something that I deeply admire. This form of connection that they form. And then obviously how they work as a team. That's one of the most incredible displays of teamwork I can think of. I know there are other species as well in the animal kingdom who do that, but these guys are doing it in the most extreme conditions, -40, -50 C, winds blowing at 200 kilometers an hour. Being that stressed and still being willing to work as a team, I think that says a lot about that species.
What would you say penguins can teach us?
I think that's fairly easy. They can teach us that you can pretty much achieve anything if you work together as a team. Because who would think that you could live in a place like Antarctica and not only live there but actually live there and create new life as well. And they managed to do this, but
Hmm.
they only managed that as a group. A single bird would not be able to do this. And I think they're all aware of that. And I think they're all fine with that because they have each other and they have this entire group of birds who are trying to do the same thing. And I believe by having that same goal, we want to survive here and we want to bring up our offspring here. By having that same goal, the teamwork actually works. If they all had different goals, then maybe this would be a different story. But this unification, if you will, this is their biggest strength.
What also always inspired me personally about the penguins, especially in the Antarctic Peninsula, was the resilience. You mentioned they are
Mhm.
living in such harsh conditions, but they just wing it and go on.
Yeah, and they don't, right, and they don't talk about it, right?
Maybe they do.
And maybe they do, but it doesn't seem like they're super stressed or something like that, right? So they just know, okay, it's going to be a shitty day. I will just deal with it.
Yeah.
And I will deal with it in the way that I have dealt with it before. I will huddle up. I will go to my peers. We will all do the same. We will work together and we will get through this together. And I think this is something that we as human beings, we should take this as a role model, because I believe we also have a lot of issues at hand. And we need to understand again that we also want the same thing in the end. We want to have a roof over our heads. We want that our kids are safe. We want to have food on the table. So these basic things, we all want the same. So why is it that we can't find a way to work together? It's sometimes hard to understand.
Yeah, we need to learn more from penguins. Let's do it like the penguins do.
And they dress better too, right?
Yeah, that's true. Like always
Yeah,
in style, ready for any
always.
social occasion. You once described penguin relationships as penguin love. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I think this is exactly the idea that I just mentioned. So they form these beautiful connections, and they form them with their environment, with their mates, with their offspring, amongst each other. There are all of these connections, and their entire life cycle is based on connection and based on this bond. And I was looking for a name that would be a good name for this bond, and I felt penguin love would be a fitting one, because there is a certain aspect of love to it, right? If you really love your neighbor, if you love your offspring, your partner, and even if you love the place, the world in which you live, then you will have success, and you will have a fulfillment. And that's why it felt so fitting. And this is why I chose it, because it just felt like love in all of these moments that I experienced that. And it actually took me a while to understand that. I think at first, during my first winter, when I was taking photos, I was mainly busy with myself, trying to figure out how you take photos in these conditions, how you adapt to the cold. But when I was there for the second time and I knew all of these things and I could really focus on the birds and really focus on telling a story, then it hit me that all of this connection is probably the key to their survival.
And you mentioned being there twice. Have you noticed any colony pattern changes due to climate shifts, or anything that you noticed immediately, like after coming back the second time? Okay, the environment is really changing.
Yeah, I could tell that the numbers of the colony had
Mm,
increased. There were a lot more birds there, and I didn't understand why. But a couple of 100 kilometers away, don't quote me on how many, there's Halley Bay. And
mm,
Halley Bay lost its emperor penguin colony a couple of years ago. Must have been around 6, 7, 8 years ago, something
mm,
like that. And a lot of these birds that were in that colony, they have now moved over to Atka Bay. So Atka Bay now holds roughly about 20,000 emperors, while when I was there the first time in 2012, they only had around 10,000 birds. It doubled in size. And one of the theories, and I think it's even proven now, that many of the birds that were part of the Halley Bay colony, they have spread, and they are now part of other colonies around the shoreline, and Atka Bay is one of them. So Atka Bay has increased in numbers quite significantly. And the other thing that you notice is that the ice shelf is breaking up. It's not like critical, I would say, at this point, but it is losing ice. When I was there for the first time, again in 2012, I think the edge of the ice shelf to the north was around 25 kilometers away. I think now it's around 18 kilometers. The ice shelf is losing ice, and the bay is to some extent getting smaller. And I don't know if this is just something that was going to happen anyway, or if this was climate change induced. And what is certainly climate change induced is the stability of the sea ice. But I can tell a lot more about that as well.
yes, please do, because it's something that a lot of people are worried about. As you mentioned, maybe it's not critical now, but you can see the changes when you are there.
Yeah, and it's so scary because I was able to see changes, and there was only like 10 years between my first stay and my last stay, and it was already visible. And the sea ice is a special case because sea ice is a seasonal ice, so it breaks up every summer. And the bay, so Atka Bay, is then free of ice. It's just ocean splashing against the ice shelf. And the ice shelf is supposed to be stable all year round. That's why you have these two sorts of ice. You have the ice shelf, which is the stable glacier ice, and you have the sea ice, which is ocean water that freezes every winter and becomes fast ice or sea ice. And the sea ice is the basis for the penguins to breed on, because they walk on the sea ice, they breed on the sea ice, they grow up on the sea ice. So sea ice is crucial for their development and for their life. The bad thing about the sea ice is that warming ocean currents that are already arriving in Antarctica as well, they are causing the sea ice to destabilize twice. It means that since the water is warmer, the sea ice will form later during the year because it takes more time for the water to be cooled down again. In the beginning of the life cycle of the penguins, you lose a bit of time. And then later on, as the sea ice breaks up, it will break up earlier again, because again, the water that's coming from below is warmer and the sea ice is not as stable or not as thick as it was in earlier years. So it will also break up earlier, which is cutting then the time which the chicks have to grow up. To some extent, you can argue that the time span, the stable ice time span that the birds need in order to breed is cut twice, in the beginning and at the end. And that is obviously a big issue for these birds because they can't really adapt their lifestyle or their bring up of offspring to these changes in such a quick way. There was even an incident in the Bellinghausen Sea area in 2022 where a total of 4 emperor penguin colonies lost their entire chicks, so their entire brood for that year. And I think a total of around 10,000 chicks died in just one single event when the sea ice broke up too early and the chicks weren't able to swim yet. They need time to exchange their downy feathers for the adult feathers so that they can swim, and they simply weren't ready yet when the sea ice broke up. And we are going to see more and more of that in the future. Unfortunately.
Is there anything everyday people like me can do to make a difference for the penguins and the environment?
I think we all can make a difference with our lifestyle choices. That's one thing. That's maybe hard to understand, but it's true that the choices we make here will have an effect on places thousands of kilometers away. We're all connected by the air that we breathe, right? So I'm not saying I'm breathing air from Spain or Germany. Air doesn't belong to anybody. Air belongs to all of us. So what happens to the air and what happens to our atmosphere has an impact on the entire globe, on weather patterns, climate patterns, sea ice stability, the way that we, especially in the Western world, the way that we consume things, that we consume resources of the planet. That's having a direct impact on the environment, and hence it will have a direct impact on penguins as well. Everybody must make their choices. Everybody should take a long and hard look in the mirror and ask themselves, what can I do better? But also try to put pressure on the politicians as well. Make sure that those big levers, like what is going to happen with CO2 exhaust in the industry, how is this being taxed? How is this being regulated? We need to make sure that everybody is held accountable for what they're doing to the planet and that they are doing their best efforts to minimize that impact. And that's, I think, our goal, our duty. So first, take a look in the mirror and check what we can do ourselves, but then also make sure that this is going into legislation by, voting, by being active, by spreading the word. I mean, there's many things that we can do, and I guess we can learn here from the penguins. If we do this as a group and if we do this as a unified voice, there's a good chance that we could be successful. That's giving me hope, at least.
Well said. Giving me hope as well. Now let's talk about your penguin book, which I have here as well.
Excellent. Yeah.
I decided that when we go to this winter hike, I will bring it so you can sign it for me.
Okay.
I have it in my living room. It's like a trophy. Everyone who comes for a visit sees it, tell everyone about the book.
It's great.
And I love it. I read it probably 1,000 times. I'm just randomly flipping and just looking at the penguin pictures because it's a visual masterpiece. I really feel like I'm standing with the penguins or wherever you have been standing when I look at the pictures. I would like to talk what inspired you to turn years of photography into a book?
I think the feedback I got from people I talked to about my experiences, pretty much everybody said, Stefan, you should make a book of that and write down all that you have experienced. And to be honest, what I have written down in that book is just a fraction of the things that I have experienced, right? My editor back in the day when I was writing it, like, he was brutal. Take whole passages and just cross them out. And actually this was supposed to be a photo book only.
Mm.
And I told them I couldn't do it. I couldn't, just put photos in there. I needed to tell stories as well. And so it took them a while to give me around 60,000 characters, I believe it was, that I could write. And by the time I had done the first draft, I think I was at 140,000 or something like that. So way, way beyond what I was allowed. And it took me a long time to make the deal with them that we could extend this to around 100,000 characters or something like that. This book ended up being a lot more text than it was originally intended to, but I believe that is one of the things that makes this book nice, because it's not just pretty photos, it's also the story behind the photos. And that's what people want to read and want to hear. And that's also what I wanted to share. So a lot of the experience that we just talked about, what I learned during my time down there and what I learned from the birds, I needed to write that down. And I think it has not only been nice for the people who read it, but I think it was also very nice for me to revisit that in my head and to revisit what I had experienced. So even I take that book every now and then and go through it and just try to relive some of these moments.
I'm very glad that you managed to not just get out a photographic book, because the texts to the pictures are really amazing. As I mentioned, like the picture takes me to the penguins, but then when I read the story behind it, it's even like more personal. I feel I was on the trip with you.
Yeah, and that was exactly my goal. So if it worked out, that's great.
Worked out, definitely worked out.
Nice. Thank you.
And you already mentioned that it was hard to put less words than you were allowed to put in the book. But was writing the book as emotionally demanding as shooting the pictures in the field?
Maybe even more so, I would say, because all of a sudden you had time to think about what you had experienced. When you are down there, right in the moment, and you're taking the frame, if you know that you got the photo, there's this rush of adrenaline and joy. You're happy about that. And then when you're writing about it, this is the time when you think about it again, when you think about what it actually meant to you in that moment, to witness something that maybe only a handful of people have ever witnessed in their lives. I do remember that night that we were out there to photograph the penguins under the Aurora Australis. Visually aesthetic scene, and once you're out there, you're just soaking it up, you're just enjoying it, you're taking your photos, and it's like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. But once you're back home and you're seeing these photos again and you start writing about that, then you feel like, okay, this is actually something that only a handful of people, maybe a couple more, have ever seen in their lives. Probably more people went to space than people who have seen the Aurora Australis dancing above the penguins. The magnitude just hits you, right? And then you start really even more cherishing these moments.
Yes, just talking about it gives me goosebumps. Imagining penguins under the aurora must have been a once in a lifetime moment.
Absolutely amazing.
Is there any particular photo in the book that you really like?
I think pretty much every photo I put in there I liked.
So from how many pictures did you have to choose just to put this amount of pictures inside?
I don't want to lie, but it was well beyond 10,000 images for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it's become more ever since.
Can we expect some second edition or a second book?
I've actually been thinking about that, to be honest.
Great.
I do have some new material. I'm thinking about a new story that I want to tell with that. And it's not quite matured yet enough in my head to say that I can give you a date when it's going to be out, but my mind is working on it. So yes, for sure, there will be something coming. I just cannot say how long or how far away it is, but it's cooking.
Good to know. Maybe once in a while I will just ask on Instagram, how's the second book
Absolutely.
coming?
Please do that.
As a reminder, I'm still waiting to order it.
Also to keep the pressure up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you always have someone to make you accountable. It pushes you more.
Yeah, I've been very absent from social media in this year, and this is actually one of the reasons for that, because my mind has been busy and I didn't want to spend so much time on social media, but rather to spend time on the next steps that I want to take.
I'm super excited now. I mean, you must have thousands of stories to tell from your 2 trips to Antarctica. So I will definitely remind you about the second book.
Yeah, exactly. It's like thousands of small stories, but how do you spin them into one bigger story? That's kind of the goal here. I don't want to give out little snippets. I want to make this a very, very big thing.
You did a great job with this book, so I know that the second one will be even better.
I really hope so.
No pressure, of course.
No pressure, no.
I read that you won major awards, the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, the Ocean Photographer of the Year, and looking back to those awards, what does recognition like this mean to you personally?
I would say it was a great experience to win these prizes and to be at the awards and meet all of these other charismatic and inspiring people that are working on the forefront of visual storytelling, and very inspiring connections. I made some good friends as well. Friends I have a lot of exchange with, even nowadays, even though those prizes are quite a few years ago already. But I think what it did first and foremost was it was opening doors, really. Once you have been placed in such a competition, all of a sudden you get connections into the industry, you get connections to the image agencies, publishing houses, yeah, people who are working in conservation, people who are working in photography in general. And it just helps to get your story out there, a story that I wanted to have as many people hear as possible. And so winning these prizes helped a lot in that. It gave me exposure and it gave me the chance to share my story and my photos. I am absolutely certain there are a lot of people out there who take amazing photos, who have amazing stories to tell, but they don't have a voice yet, or they don't have the stage on which they can present yet. And I would say for this, winning a photo competition is something that really helps. And to be honest, there's also a lot of luck involved. Juries for photo competitions, they change every year. And even if you have not been successful with a competition entry in 1 year, it doesn't mean that those were bad images or you weren't good enough. It just meant that the jury in that year had a different focus or wanted something else to win. Maybe there was a person who didn't like penguins. Rumors have it there are people like that. I've never
I also
met
heard
one,
the rumors. Yeah, I never met one.
but this could all play a role. I think in a way I would encourage everybody, if they believe they have a good body of work, to keep putting it into the competitions, even though if they have been unsuccessful, because that doesn't say anything about the quality of your work.
We already tackled a little bit on what's next for you. I mean, the second book is coming somewhere in the future. We don't know the date yet, but it's coming. And you've been also part of film projects. I know the BBC Dynasties. And is there anything else that's up in the horizon that we don't know about?
I've currently nothing lined up, to be honest.
You have the Penguin book, the second one.
Yeah. I mean that yes, but filming wise, I don't have anything at the moment, I would say. So yeah, if there's anybody out there looking for somebody who knows about the penguins, Atka Bay, visual storytelling, form of film and photo, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I enjoy being able to spend time with my wife because I am actually home and I can focus on these other things that are driving me at the moment.
No more expedition to Antarctica. You mentioned like it was your last one, the second one, but no more plans to go back?
I wouldn't say I would rule it out. So if the opportunity arises, certainly I will consider it. But I have nothing planned at the moment. Many people think I'm down there every year. No, I'm not down there every year. It's not like I can snap my fingers and I can go down there. I need to wait for an opportunity to arise. It needs to make sense.
Mm.
And there needs to be a project. So I personally cannot afford taking a trip down there all by myself just to take photos. That's not how it works.
That's how I think many people imagine it. You just go there
Yeah,
randomly, take pictures,
exactly.
vacation time.
Because I'm super rich and I can just go whenever I want. Yeah, no, I'm not.
You must have seen also the other species there.
Not so many, actually. I only saw Adelies as well.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Adelies are fun. I really like them. They're adorable. They're little troublemakers, I call them, because whenever they are around, they're causing some sort of commotion in the emperor colony. It's really fun watching them. They're really, they have a character, I would say.
There are a lot of penguin species out there. You personally met a few of them. What would you say is your favorite penguin species and why?
The emperor, because I am absolutely in love with them and I always will be. Yeah.
It
There's
was a
absolutely
super fast answer.
no doubt about it.
Yeah, it was like no doubt in your voice at all. It's
No.
emperor. Don't even finish the question. It's an emperor.
I really like the others, but I only love the emperor.
There is something about them. I like how you describe them, that they are super chill. You know, it's like minus 40 degrees outside, but they're chill. They're just going on their day.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not bothered at all.
And is there any particular smell or sound that takes you instantly back to Antarctica?
No, sound would be absolutely nothing. If it's absolutely silent, that would be something that would take me back there. Smell, there are not so many smells, and the ones that there are, they're not so nice. They would be like really old, rotten fish, maybe. that that doesn't take me back usually. That just makes me
So the
throw up.
silence takes you back. Okay.
Yeah, it does.
What advice would you give young photographers dreaming of their own penguin expedition? Asking for a friend, of course.
In terms of taking photos and sending
Mm.
them to competitions, I think I just mentioned one tip that I would give everybody. If you believe your work is good, then keep sending it in. I think the second one would be think about what is the story that you want to tell. I think we live in an age where single photos are abundant. In fact, there's an overflow of pretty photos. And if you want to stand out, then you need to be able to tell a story with your pictures. And that can be with style, so visually, it can be with text, with anecdotes, with knowledge from the field, so things like this. So whatever is able to keep people immersed in your work for more than just a couple of seconds, like for more than it just takes to swipe up. In the end, find the one topic or the one thing that really gets you up, that gets you out of bed. And if it's the penguins, great. It's not easy to get there. So if you want to go to the penguins, then I would maybe say try to find if there are positions in research that you could
Mm.
apply for. Every base that is located in Antarctica, they need a team of researchers, they need a team of people who work maintenance. So the duties around such a research station are pretty manifold. There's lots of opportunity. And then if you found what could be your entry point into such a position, then work on it. If it is research, then finish your studies and make sure you don't barely get through, but you actually excel in your grades and stuff like that. So pretty much the basics.
Yes, thank you. It's a good advice. And sometimes it's the basic that we need to remember. Everybody hopes for some super secret tip, but it's usually the basics and being resilient.
Exactly. That's actually a good point. Being very resilient. So even if it doesn't seem that your odds are high, still try. You never know. But you can only get there if you try. If you don't try, you will never be able to get there.
Agree. And before we wrap up, where can listeners find you, follow you, order your amazing penguin book?
So I do try to keep my website up to date to some extent. And that's, you can find that in nature-in-focus.de,
Mm.
DE for Germany. And you can find me on Instagram as well, even though I've not been very active this year, but still most of my information is there. And if there's big news, I'm going to share it there as well. And the handle is at Christmann Photo.
Perfect. I will put everything in the show notes. It was super exciting to have this talk with you, and I learned a lot, not just about photography, but again about penguins. Thank you
Great.
again very much for being
You're
on the
welcome.
show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It was fun again for me to relive some of these moments in my head.
And as always, thank you for listening. If you like this episode, be sure to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who loves penguins, or just great conversations. Until next time, take care, stay cool, and I will catch you in the next episode.
Join us in their world where every moment's a surprise. Oh, penguin paradise, where the penguins dance and sing under the watchful eyes of the sun. They live a life so fun. From the Arctic to Antarctica, their stories